Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation. Kiitos kutsusta. I was asked to give my presentation in English, and I will try to do my best to describe you quite honestly the situation of personalized medicine, and I'm doing that on purpose from the ministry's point of view. There are other people present in this room who can tell you more about how the operators, the actual experts, do see the situation. And I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion with all of you, because many of the opportunities and also the challenges, I'm sure we share between Estonia and Finland, and also between many other countries, which we are also going to hear of during this meeting. Well, I have to start with that the background, the sort of the atmosphere behind all political discussions in Finland today are the questions of financial austerity and sustainability, particularly the sustainability of the public sector, including the health and social sector, in front of the challenges that the aging population now gives to us. We live right now the phase of increasing costs of pensions, but within the next 10-15 years we will also see a huge increase in the need of care, actual caring hands. And to have those hands available, even when the economic burden is at its highest, we need to do something with the system. We need to take the maximum efficiency out of our health and social care system. So the situation in October 2015 is that the Finnish healthcare and social care system is facing large reforms. When preparing for this talk, I looked at my talk that I gave in a meeting here in Tallinn in January this year. We were then getting ready for parliamentary elections. After the elections, we got a new government, and the reform that we were anticipating in January was stopped during the last few weeks of that parliament, and now the new government has set new outlines for the social and healthcare reform with major changes compared with the previous one. At the same time, the fiscal constraints are still the same, even maybe worse. Unemployment is on the increase, and we have seen refugee and migrant groups entering the country beyond all expectations. So all these things capture the attention of the government. So how do we present the needs of the new ICT strategy, the needs of the suggested new national genome strategy, the needs of the biobanking activities to the government, so that we would get the mandate and the necessary support to take the next steps? These are the questions that we as civil servants have to make these days. The new government's program was published in May, and the major change in our health and social care structure will include removal of the responsibility for these services from the municipalities to a new regional organization. Now we are talking about improving cost containment as one of the main targets of the reform, something that we didn't mention a few years ago at all. And the main tools are full integration of primary, secondary and tertiary healthcare and maximal digitalization of all services. So this is the background. Before the elections and during the preparation for the new government program, the three ministries, Ministry of Employment and the Economy, Social Affairs and Health, and Education and Culture, put together a joint strategy for national health sector growth and innovation activities. and we worked really, really hard to bring this as one of the spearhead projects in the new government's program. And we can say that in the program we do see some of the goals very clearly, but as a whole, we didn't really get the full mandate to take very brave steps forward to put this strategy into action. And it goes beyond the scope of this presentation to address why that actually was or came out that way. But in any case, the strategy is still there, and we are now having new discussions with the two other ministries about what should be the next steps to make Finland an internationally renowned forerunner in the health sector research and innovation. So what have been the building blocks of personalized medicine, which is one of the spearhead projects or concepts of the health growth strategy? It all, of course, started with the national registries, which have been around ever since the early 50s, if you look at some of the cancer register examples, and also the registers of social security are run by the states and are available for some registry-based research purposes, also for medical investigators. The next building block was the National Archive, Electronic Archive of Health Information, which has three main pillars. The first one was e-prescription, the second one is the e-archive, and the third one is the e-access. And now, being here in Estonia, I need not to describe to you the basic concepts, because you have, in many respects, the same kind of e-archive, prescription and access systems. Perhaps the main difference between the Estonian and Finnish systems is that our e-archive tries to be as structured as possible, which makes the data more easily available for secondary purposes if we permit that by a new law which is currently being prepared. The national services are accessed through local systems, and this is one of our problems. The local systems are so many, and there are inconsistencies, and there are transaction costs, but the new government also, part of its program, tries to tackle this problem by making it mandatory to all healthcare providers to have interoperability standards regionally and then nationally. This part of the building blocks has been very well received by the actors. E-prescriptions are now the mainstream. Almost 100% of the prescriptions are electronic, and you understand that having the electronic healthcare records, having the registry data, having e-prescriptions makes the country quite attractive for pharmaceutical companies, not for the traditional drug development purposes also, but also for pharmacovigilance, drug safety, post-marketing type of studies, because the data is instantly and immediately available. The Kanta services, which make the electronic health record, the Kela is actually the national health insurance institution, is responsible for maintaining the Kanta registries and all its functions. The latest addition to Kanta architecture has been My Kanta pages, the pages that are available to patients and citizens. At this point, for checking the information and the logs, who has used the data, but in the future it will also be possible for citizens to introduce data themselves to these My Kanta pages, data from mobile health apps and own care and self-care devices. This is actually part of the government's program and will be available in the next 2 years or so. And people are gradually learning that My Kanta service is there, and the monthly visits are rapidly on the increase. So about 10% of the population have already checked, actually 5% if you look at the 250,000 different visitors. All visits are close to 500,000 by now. I think that it's quite important that we maintain trust in these systems. And therefore, it is very important that patients can check how their personal information is used. So patients can check the use and release of their personal health information through the e-access portal. It's immediately available which organizations have used their data, and by a special request you can also have a full log count of who has accessed and processed the data. Now, getting a little bit closer to the actual elements of personalized medicine. The next step was the Biobank Law, which came into action in January 2013. And it has 3 important principles. And we tend to say, although I have to be a little bit careful with this, that this could be the best biobank law presently in action in the world. First, regulation by national authorities, the professionality, quality standards of the different biobanks. There is no single national biobank, but it is possible for any legal body or private company to found a biobank and go through the legal procedures to have that accepted by the national regulatory authorities. The Biobank Act is also quite precise about the protection of the donor's rights, informed consent, opt-out procedures, availability of retrospective samples, there are special procedures for that, privacy protection, and so on. And also, what is a little bit difficult might be in practice in the future is the donor's right to know the usage of samples and perhaps change their opt-out consents, which is considered tricky by some of the biobank operators. But that is actually what the law says about that. And then the promotion of research and development. The key concept is the broad consent and the permission to link the biobank specimens with information from hospital databases and national registries. And also for the use of future studies, all raw data resulting from the biobank material will return to the biobank for future biobank research purposes. So this law has now been there for about 2 years, and by now all university hospitals have founded their clinical biobanks, and there are also some biobanks mainly managed by the National Public Health Institute that contain samples from large population studies that actually date back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The biobanks are brought together by the BBMRI.fi consortium, which is part of the corresponding European ERIC consortium. And we have had large hopes that this organization would take care of the interoperability issues and the cooperation issues between the biobanks. But the truth is that some of the biobanks, and I have to give credit to the Auria biobank from Turku, that some of the biobanks have been pioneers and have really had the pros and cons of the pioneers. They are a few rounds ahead of the others, and this has brought us to the point where we really have to take due diligence issues seriously if you want to share what you have developed with the others. So there is a paycheck for that. And since BBMRI.fi is actually governed by the state, it was accepted by the Parliament. So I think that at this point we all have to come together and sit around a table and face the questions of enhanced cooperability between different biobanks, be they population-based or clinical biobanks, because we cannot afford doing things several times, repeating things in these biobanks that could be done together. So this morning we were introduced to the Estonian ID card. We don't have such a thing in Finland as the Estonian ID card, but we do have a person ID number that every resident of the country must have. And this person ID number is really the glue that brings together all the different pieces of information, registries, healthcare records, and so on, that the biobank does need to be able to make the benefit from the actual samples that are stored in the biobank. So the next question is that what does the biobank actually store? It stores biological samples, but could it also become a storage for all relevant information combined? And this is the next question. We let the Biobank Act go through the Parliament when it was not perfect, to make it possible for the biobanks to begin their actions. And now we have come to the point where we start to see that the law, the act, actually needs to be updated, corrected, if you wish to use that word, because we have faced a couple of problems in real life that need legal support, and we are trying to do our best in the ministry to rewrite these paragraphs and submit them to the Parliament, I hope, next year. And we keep talking to the biobanks about the details, which I think is very important to listen to those who actually have experience of how that act is put into practice. And as Mr. Chair already mentioned in the introduction, the latest addition to the building blocks of personalized medicine concept in Finland is actually the working group's report on the genome strategy, or the strategy of the use of genomic information in Finland, which was officially launched in June this year. And with this strategy, we aim that by the year 2020, genomic data will be or should be effectively used in healthcare and in the promotion of health and well-being to achieve population health benefits. It was very important for the Ministry of Health that the concept of population health benefits be mentioned in this strategy. And I have to give credit to Sitra, an independent fund reporting to the Parliament, for supporting and facilitating the preparation of this strategy together with the Ministry. Why do we need a national genomic strategy? To take full advantage of the potential benefits of the genomics era, and I have to emphasize the word potential. Fostering research and innovation policies and mainstreaming genomic technologies in the Finnish health system to ensure equitable access and rational use of these technologies. So it's not a question whether we want to accept genomic information in our healthcare. It is there. The question is about how to mainstream it and how to guarantee equitable access to this fascinating new type of information and make rational use of it. So Finland has a very peculiar settlement history. The earliest settlements came from south and southwest, and then there was a second settlement probably from Central Europe that came to the southeastern part of the country, and then in the 16th and 17th century, mainly due political reasons, the migration of the population northwards was quite extensive, and then came a lot of tragedies, famine, wars and so on, there was a small residual population remaining, and that was the origins of the genetic homogeneity of the present day's Finnish population. So these are the main strategic goals of the suggested genome strategy. I have to emphasize at this point that this was a working group report, very representative of all the actors and sponsored by the ministry, but it's not yet officially accepted by the government. But since it was quite openly discussed during the government's program writing process, now everybody is aware of this document, and I think that even if we were a little bit disappointed that it was not mentioned as such in the government's program, so awareness among the ministers is now quite evident. I'm not going to read through all the strategic goals of this document. Strategies are always written like this, but I want to emphasize the first red basic principle, that we have to discuss the ethical principles and the legal framework so that they are openly and transparently formulated and available for the application of genomics. Meanwhile, of course, the actors take steps forward, and one of these projects is the so-called SISU project, the sequencing initiative Suomi, which aims at sequencing about 200,000 individuals. It is a joint venture of the Public Health Institute and a couple of other institutions in Finland, and then actors abroad, mostly in the US. And I'm not an expert on this project, but I wanted to mention it, that we need the reference databases to be able to draw any conclusions, for example, from the clinical databases that are being built at the same time. Well, there is a whole lot of interest in the combined use of genomic data together with all the other databases that are available, including also the so-called big data, the digital fingerprint that we are leaving around us every day in our everyday lives. There's a whole lot of enthusiasm around. But how do we handle all this data? How do we do that in practice? And how can we afford putting all that data together? So while we were putting together the genome strategy, it became quite evident that we need a national operator to handle all these databases. And so the next step was that Sitra actually made a major decision to start a project to build a digital health hub, an operator that would serve all the databases, data sources, and data users in the country, and they have set the goal to 2017. It is a major project, even for a national actor like Sitra. And what would this one-stop service then do? It is not taking the role away from the different databases, but it tries to gather the data and refine it on the national level through standard interfaces, so that those who need the value-added services would get all the services they need from this one-stop point, so that the utilization of information would become more practical, even for the authorities, for the public research institutes, private research institutes, pharmaceutical industry, and at the end of the day, even for individuals, citizens. It's a brave plan, but I have to say that there have been attempts to do this for certain segments, for example, for Comprehensive Cancer Care Finland, For some biobanks have had plans of their own like this, and I think that it is a good idea to at least try to have a national operator that will then serve all the different interested groups for these very similar kinds of actions that we all need. So, would like to end my very quick review of the current situation in Finland with a few questions about the future. We know that legislation lags always a couple of rounds behind from real life, and the application of genomic medicine or personalized medicine, for example, when it comes to individualized drug treatment selection, it's already here. It's a very rapidly evolving feature of medicine, and we as government representatives have to keep our eyes and minds open and try to understand how this new information changes the practice of medicine and how we have to take that into account in our health, in designing resilient health systems. So it is already there. But there is also a sort of imbalance of knowledge between the government and the research societies, and we need to talk to each other and talk in language that is understood by politicians so that they can understand the huge value of these new approaches and also the pace, the rapid pace, how medicine moves forward through, for example, the use of genomic information. Another major change that we already face is the digital approach to the practice of medicine. We don't practice primary care, specialized care, home care the way we used to do it in the next 5 to 10 years. It is a total revolution. That is also part of the personalized medicine concept. In Finland, we don't want to view personalized medicine only as an application of genomic data, but we want to see it as the personal tailoring of care concepts with use of digital tools and personalized service modeling. It is a challenge to a public healthcare system like ours, where we used to plan the operations a little bit differently. It's a total change of power in our healthcare. But I think that at the end of the day, that will also give us added value, better patient satisfaction, and better support from the population who supports the system by paying taxes. Even those who are not that dependent on the system, when they come to us and ask for care, if they see a modern approach, personalized approach, as they see in any other field of life, then they will be positively affected and they will be paying for their taxes for the maintenance of the system also in the future. So I think this is extremely important facet of personalized medicine, that the service experience is more personalized than it used to be. Other actors see a whole lot of business opportunities through digital health and the application of genomic data. But I think that we have come to the point where the honeymoon, so to say, is over. It all started with a well-functioning healthcare system. Then came access to digital health data. Then came access to genomic data and biobanks. The people still trust the system. They trust the operators. They trust medical researchers. But I think that we have come to the point where government backing is very important. And why is that? It is because even if it would not be the case really, people do see new threats in these new kinds of information that we want to use in healthcare in the future. It's particularly, I'm talking about the use of genomic data. The use of genomic data in medicine was introduced to the EU member states during the Italian presidency, and it has been there ever since. And we know that the Luxembourgish presidency is putting together council conclusions on personalized medicine, and they are due this coming December. And those of us who have followed the writing process of the conclusions do know that we do face legal issues. We do face threats about abuse of the information. We do face suspicions of the promises of cost efficiency of the use of genomic information in healthcare. And above all, the practice of developing new medicines is changing, and there is increasing tension between the pharmaceutical companies, the academia, the pharmaceutical companies, and the regulatory authorities, because the old set of rules is not applying anymore to drug development, being that a representation of the very rapid developments in medicine. So I think that we have to be able to discuss the tensions in this field, whether are we calling this a regulatory nightmare, or are we calling it the protection of patient privacy and safety? And I think that these issues will be very much discussed in the next few years to come. Thank you very much.
Kiitoksia paljon. Thank you very much. We now proceed as follows, that we will have a couple of immediate questions, and then later on you and Tom will come on the podium and we have a more profound discussion.
Yeah.
Et meil on nüüd võimalus Liisa-Mariale esitada mõned küsimused. Meil on mõned küsimused juba tulnud sinna sellesse keskkonda, elektroonilisesse keskkonda, aga julgelt palun kasutage võimalust küsida mitte elektroonselt, vaid otse kätt tõstes ja küsimust esitades. But let's continue with these couple of questions we have there. So actually you answered the second one. How many samples are there in Biobank? It was 74, I think, in your presentation.
Quite many. Perhaps we have to ask Eero. Eero, where are you? Oh, sorry, Olli. Sorry.
So for the time being, the biobank, so we had two types of biobanks, the hospital biobanks and then the cohort biobank. The THL has collected samples for quite a few decades, and those samples, or most of them, have now been transferred to the biobank. So there are several hundred thousands, I don't know the exact number, but 300 to 400,000 samples from cohorts with follow-up. Then the hospital biobanks are emerging. Aurea biobank that Liisa-Maria was talking about has already moved the old retrospective diagnostic samples that, according to the law, can be moved to the biobank based on an opt-out procedure, and that contains about 1 million samples that are from the electronic database time, so from 80s. The same will happen within the next few months in other biobanks, and for instance in Helsinki there will be more than 2 million samples that will be moved. So all in all, within the end of next year, I would say that there are 6 to 7 million archived samples. Then there are about 500,000 of either the cohort samples or prospectively collected samples.
That was an expert answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Then we have a question from Jaak. How is scientific use of big data analytics reported to the patients?
It's a good question. Should it be reported to the patients? There is a whole lot of big data being collected of us every day. I mean, in our life we cannot avoid leaving a digital fingerprint that's being analyzed. I mean, I read somewhere that every day you leave a digital fingerprint that 50 different operators do analyze. And they say they do it in order to serve you better, to advertise your things according to your personal preferences and so on. But if we start to use this data in health, I think we have to have a thorough discussion about the legal and ethical aspects. It probably has to be more transparent than it is today in other fields of business.
Right. This is a pretty actual topic also in Estonia right now, how to give back some reward to those gene donors who have donated their blood, let's say 10 years ago, and how to inform them. But I think we will have...
Well, that's another issue. I mean, if you have given a sample to a biobank, our law says that the sample donor has the right to know how that sample has been used. It's still a small-scale activity in Finland, and I think that when it's really becomes mainstream, you have to develop very practical means of doing this.
Right. Thank you very much. Kas saalist on küsimusi, kes ei ole kasutanud elektroonseid vahendeid? Palun. There is a question.
Yes. I have a question regarding to education.
I would like you to introduce yourself, just
Maris
very briefly.
From University of Tartu. My question regards to the education of citizens. Mm-hmm. So what are your strategies, how do you plan to educate, especially senior citizens, in terms of this new type of looking at what has happened with the data, and in terms of genetics, for example? So what I know, I always follow what Finland is doing because I think you have good strategies. So what is how do you plan to do this educational part?
Yes, thank you very much for a very good question. I think there are 2 or 3 different strategic goals in our genome strategy addressing this question. I have to say that our media has been very positive. So they have had very good newspaper articles, internet articles on the main concepts or the principles of the use of genomic data. But at the same time, many of us do remember the GMO problems that we had in agriculture about 10 years ago, how difficult discussion that was. And I have this feeling that the word gene is still a little bit frightening. And so I think it is a wise approach that we won't push it too harsh, but we will start with the educational material in primary and secondary schools and have some very well-targeted sessions for teachers and so on to make small steps to begin with.
Thank you very much. And then we have final question, which is about how should government give any incentives to the patients or citizen in general to gather and handle their health data, because this is kind of health promotion and maybe to decrease tax or something like that.
Well, it's still a very remote idea, I guess, to Finland to have that kind of financial incentives for health behavior. I think the question is the other way around. As I said, so the legislation and the public systems, they are always lagging a little bit behind what people actually do want to have available. I think the pressure comes from the public that we should make make it possible for people to handle their own health data. And as I showed to you, so the incentives are already there from the legislative point and the government's program. We have the mandate to make that possible. If I'm not incorrect, by 2017, that option should be available for everybody for free.
Thank you again, Liisa-Maria. I'm really happy to see how profoundly you are digging into these genome and personalized medicine issues, and I'm sure that we have a lot to take over from you very soon.